Take a look at the following 6 images and then decide what these images all have in common. So, have you figured it out? These 6 images represent what society would typically consider as the outsiders, which, coincidentally, is the name of our Term 2 novel written by S.E. Hinton. By definition, an outsider is a person that is excluded or that is not a member of a set group. In the examples that we saw in those images, the set group would be mainstream society. Our novel is actually a coming-of-age story that explores the transition from childhood to adulthood through the eyes of our 14-year-old protagonist named Ponyboy Curtis. The story was published in 1967 and is set in a small town in the United States during the 1960s. The story revolves around 2 rival gangs, the Greasers and the Socials, otherwise known as the Socs. The story realistically captures the problems of this time between these 2 social groups and carefully points out what could happen to underprivileged kids when they are not paid attention to. The Outsider has sold nearly 10 million copies in the United States and is ranked second only to Charlotte's Web in total sales of books for young people. In fact, it essentially started the genre, the realistic fiction genre for young people, and remains one of the top books used in North America for literature or novel studies in middle schools and in high schools. The novel has been translated into 23 different languages. So despite being a book written in the 60s, it remains relevant today in 2013. The Outsiders was written by author S.E. Hinton around the time that she was 15 years old. On the screen you see an excerpt from her letter addressed to the readers explaining why she decided to write the book. She was definitely inspired by a series of events taking place in her high school involving different social groups. Interestingly enough, the publishers encouraged her not to use her first name on the novel because they didn't think that the readers would believe that a woman could write such a graphic portrayal of discrimination in America. You need to remember at the time, a lot of censorship was happening. And so for a woman to explore this topic and explore the ugliness of this topic was fairly revolutionary. So she took the advice of her publishers and decided to use just her first initials. So initially, people thought it was actually a man that wrote this novel. So the story takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we see the story mostly through the perspective of the Greasers, who are the lower class group in this town. The Socs typically would wear these Madrid shirts, these plaid type shirts and khaki pants. They were well groomed, they came from affluent families, whereas the Greasers were really inspired by this guy, James Dean, the rebel. They took a lot of pride in their hair, they would put grease in their hair, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and were really proud to be smokers and kind of be this I'm proud to exhibit this tough look. In terms of entertainment, such as music and film, what really marked this generation were groups like the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Elvis Presley, who in himself was considered a rebel, much like James Dean. And in terms of film, Paul Newman was very much the actor that a lot of young men aspire to be like. He was considered a rebel. Interestingly enough, our story starts with Ponyboy Curtis watching a film by Paul Newman. Drive-ins were a popular activity for teenagers. You would take your parents' car and you'd fill it with as many people as possible and go watch the local movie, typically a Paul Newman or an Elvis Presley movie, and have a great evening. There's a very important scene in the book that takes place at the drive-in. Cars also play an important role in this novel, very much associated with the identity of each of these social groups, much like the jacket was associated with Andy's identity and his belonging to the Royals in the short story On the Sidewalk Bleeding. Drive-in restaurants were also very important during this era. Again, it was a place for teenagers to go and hang out. You'd bring your date to this restaurant, you'd pull up in your car and have a good evening there. The American dream is often a topic explored in the media, and this story actually looks at that a little bit through the perspective of teenagers, adolescents. For the characters in The Outsiders, happiness could definitely be found in a relationship with a girl, their car, some money, a dream, but most of all, their friends. Friendship is definitely prevalent in this story. Really, when we think of adolescence and the importance of friends, autonomy, decisions, things that are associated with our identity, can we really say that much has changed? Something to keep in mind as we study this novel. So something I'd like you to explore in the reply section of Edmodo is I'd like you to just briefly answer, what is an outsider in your opinion? Why do you think S.E. Hinton entitled her book The Outsiders? What clues does this give us about the book? And briefly, in 1 or 2 sentences, number 3, do you think the issues that teens face in the 1960s are still relevant today in 2013?